International Relations Podcast, and today we'll be trying to understand our neighbor China better. For that, we are joined by a very esteemed guest, Dr. Srikant Kondapalli. Dr. Kondapalli is a professor in Chinese Studies at JNU, and he has previously served as the Dean of School of International Studies at JNU. He has chaired the Center for East Asian Studies multiple times. Dr. Kondapalli holds a PhD in Chinese Studies from JNU and has trained in China at Beijing Language and Cultural University, followed by a postdoctoral fellowship at People's University Beijing. Renowned for his deep scholarship and insightful analysis, Dr. Kondapalli has authored several books, including China's Military, the PI in Transition, and China's Naval Military Power, along with numerous articles and research papers on China, military strategy, and Indo-China relations. He is a guest faculty at Indian Armed Forces institutions and a distinguished fellow at several leading think tanks. Dr. Kondapalli's work has shaped the academic and policy understanding of China in India and abroad. In today's podcast, we are privileged to host him for his expert insights into China's emergence, Indo-China dynamics, and broader regional context. Welcome, Professor, and help us understand how the government functions there.
The fundamental aspect of Chinese politics is the Communist Party's dominance. It was established in 1921, and so it is 104 years old now. This is the mover and shaker in the domestic political system of China, as well as in all walks of life. For example, in culture, in economy, in ethnic groups, in terms of the foreign policy. The Communist Party has a big role to play, and we cannot compare this with other political systems across the globe, including that of India. For instance, the Communist Party constitution plays a bigger role than the People's Republic of China, which was established in 1949. So Communist Party was established in 1921, while the PRC, People's Republic of China, was established in 1949. The Communist Party dominates the state-led institutions. In India, it does not happen. For example, the Congress Party, the BJP, the Janata Dal, or other political parties, they have to abide by the Republic of India Constitution. In the case of China, the Communist Party Constitution is supreme. Communist Party structure is supreme. Communist Party General Secretary is supreme. But actually, in reality, the chairman of the Central Military Commission is the most powerful person in China. In India, we say the Prime Minister is the most powerful, given the structure that India had adopted. But in the case of China, it is the Central Military Commission chairman, currently Xi Jinping, but before, since 1935 to 1976, Mao Zedong. From 76 to 78, Hua Kofeng. From 78 to 89, Deng Xiaoping. And from 89 to 2014, Jiang Zemin. 2014 to 2004, Jiang Zemin. 2004 to 12 was Hu Jintao, and 2012 to currently Xi Jinping. So this is the most powerful position, political position in China. We need to have a very clear picture with this. Sometimes the Central Military Commission chairman is not also powerful. For example, the Hua Kofeng tenure, as I mentioned, from 76 to 78, he was at the helm of affairs, but it was actually a transition period where Deng Xiaoping became later the chairman of the Central Military Commission. Having said that, the General Secretary of the Communist Party is powerful, but some General Secretaries are not powerful. like Zhao, who was removed after the Tiananmen Square massacre in 1989. So it's a little bit complicated in the Chinese political system. So I want you to first understand this opaqueness, and then we move on to some of the structural elements in the Chinese political system. So I mentioned about the Communist Party constitution, which is supreme, and everybody has to follow. Next level is the state, that is the PRC, something like the Republic of India, which has its own constitution. We have the constitution, which was amended several times. In the case of China, the People's Republic of China constitution, they just removed the constitution 4 times. For instance, the 1954 constitution was removed, and a new constitution came up in 1975. The 75 constitution was removed and a new constitution came in 78. And finally, the current constitution is traced to 1982, but substantially amended in 91 to 1993. So these are the 4 constitutions that apply to the state. Mind you, I mentioned to you before that the party is supreme, not the state. State here means People's Republic of China. Party means the Communist Party of China. So 2 distinct things where the Communist Party influences all walks of life. So that needs to be made clear in the beginning. So you cannot project the Indian political system to that of the Chinese political system. You make a mistake by projecting this to other political systems abroad. So that's the brief on the state constitution. But the party also has its own constitution, and most party congresses, they have enacted constitutions or amended the previous ones. So we had 20 party congresses so far. Generally, these are held every 5 years, but in the previous period, these were not held for almost a decade. So it's only since the 1980s that party congresses were held at a regular interval, 5 years. But before that, these were held inconsistently. So we can say that the party congresses, again, are the most important in the Chinese political system, where there are the electoral blocks, which include the provinces. There are several provinces. Electoral blocks include provinces. They include the PLA, People's Liberation Army. They include model workers. They include a lot of other units. So from these, the deputies to the National Party Congress are selected. And from there, they, in Beijing generally, where they make some amendments to the party constitutions. So we can say that broadly the party congresses have enacted these constitutions. So in 1945, the first party constitution change has occurred. Mind you, I'm mentioning a lot of dates and things. In 1949, the PRC was established. However, the party was established in 1921, and it had a constitution. But in 1945, even before the PRC was established, the party constitution has been changed. So please pay attention to what I'm trying to say in terms of dates and the different structures in China's political system. So here is the party, and second is the state, that is the PRC. The second party constitution change occurred in 1956, 69, 73, 77. Later, it was amended in 1982, 87, 97, and so on and so forth. So that is the significant aspect of the party constitutions. So what does the constitution of PRC mention? They have, like any constitution, fundamental tasks and goals. The surprising thing is that many liberal rights and duties that are there in the Indian Constitution or American Constitution or European countries' constitutions are also there in China. But it is implementation of these where there is a huge difference. Having said that, the Constitution mentions about the focus on socialist modernization and socialism with Chinese characteristics and working towards socialist role and how to improve the socialist system in all its aspects. So that is the focal area. They want to focus on reform and opening up and develop a market economy under the Communist Party's leadership. They also mention democracy, rule of law, self-reliance, and a democratic socialist country. However, these definitions in practice differ from that of the rest of the world. They also mention the Leninist democratic centralism concept, and they mention judicial democracy, whatever that means. They say rule of law, but it is actually the Communist Party's law that is implemented. They mention ethnic regional autonomy, but again, the Communist Party role is very significant here. So this is the concern that we have. And they mention freedom of speech and thought, religious belief, inviolable freedom of the person, right to criticize, right to welfare for old, disabled, and handicapped. All of these are mentioned. However, implementation is where the major difference of opinion and the reality comes about. For instance, you can speak, but you cannot write. While writing, censorship rules apply, and that is where the problem arises. And so this is a brief kind of introduction to the party state and the constitutions. China had published a few white papers on the aid, loans, and investments or other forms of economic diplomacy with different countries. So the key here is that China argues that it is providing aid for the third world countries, developing countries, and this is useful for the infrastructure projects, welfare projects, educational projects, or other economic projects. So this is a very significant also position that China has taken. We must see objectively that many countries today require credit for developing their infrastructure. Asia, for instance, requires some $4 to $5 trillion investments in the infrastructure projects. However, due to the Eurozone crisis, the IMF and World Bank have not been able to meet the requirements of infrastructure development. So, number one, I would suggest that China's argument and China's aid, loans, investments, etc., are useful. That's the basic position. However, these have also led to debt, and that is where the problem had arisen. For example, there are 22 African countries which are in debt to China. 22 out of 55 African countries. So that is quite substantial number of countries which have fallen into debt. How this debt has arisen? So China had lent loans, aid for several countries in South America, in Africa, in Asia. And so the state-owned banks like the CDB, China Development Bank, Exim Bank, Export-Import Bank, People's Bank of China, or the other state-owned banks have lent money to several countries for some projects. It could be a drinking water project. It could be on curing HIV/AIDS project in Africa, or some environmental issue, or a water conservancy project, or building a dam, something like this. They have lent money for these, and sometimes, or most of the time, let me say, these were lent to the leaders. So corruption was one of the issues that came up because the leaders, strategic leaders. So China was careful, not only the ruling party leaders, but also the opposition leaders. They were able to pay some kickbacks, or the banks have been able to get some incentives for these leaderships. And that is where the problem began. The Chinese wanted in return strategic resources like copper, like rare earth metals, like gold, uranium, manganese, or even timber from these countries to be exported. So guarantees regarding the export of these was required. So China would sign an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, with these countries, and with an explicit position that this should not be disclosed. The provisions of the MOU should never be disclosed. However, one African country disclosed these provisions, and that is where we get to know what are the provisions, conditionalities that China insists in terms of the aid, loan, investments, others. And this is a problem. So the IMF and World Bank, or generally the Paris group of donors, they insist on the recipient country that they should not have child labor. They should not have corruption. They should not violate human rights. But China, following the Beijing consensus against the Washington consensus, says it doesn't say anything about these violations. So it is easier for many of the corrupt countries' leaderships to acquire these loans, aid, investments, but properly not utilize these. And whatever be the implementation part, we have seen some countries falling into debt. So that was the outcome of all of these.
And does the Xi Jinping's recent absence from media imply anything in the global context?
Xi Jinping was not physically absent. So he had attended a few meetings recently. So this is actually not a factually correct. So we cannot say that he has been absconding on that. I mean, there were some reports which mentioned in the websites, different websites.
Yes, sir.
He has been attending a few functions, and recently he went to Moscow, and for the parade in Red Square. So we cannot say for sure that he has been absent for a long time. Of course, there is a big challenge, that is true. while the Communist Party says it doesn't have political factions in the Communist Party, but there are actually factions, and these are actually problematic in the whole, hierarchy. So we cannot say, for instance, the faction has acted in this way or that way. But most important is that there is a number of factions. For example, Xi Jinping himself belongs to the Shanxi province, his home province. He also has the New Zhejiang Army. New Zhejiang is a river in Zhejiang province where Xi Jinping was a party secretary in the 2000s, early 2000s. So it is called New Zhejiang Army. Nothing to do with the army, but army as a group of people, focused people. So New Zhejiang Army is another faction within the Communist Party, where Xi Jinping is said to be close to that faction. Then Xi Jinping is also, he served in Shanghai for a few months as a party secretary. So we also call Shanghai Gang because those who served in Shanghai, they have intensified the reform and opening up. And those who belong to Shanghai, like Jiang Zemin, like Churumqi, like Li Qiang, the current premier, or Xi Jinping before, these are all part of the Shanghai Gang. So this is one level of factions. The second level is Communist Youth League. You may have seen these videos in the 20th Communist Party Congress in October 2020, when Hu Jintao was taken away forcibly. So Hu Jintao, as I mentioned before, he served as the party secretary of the Communist Party between 2002 to 2012. So he was shown the door in that video, forcibly taken away. He belonged to the Communist Youth League. Hu Yaobang, Hu Jintao, Li Keqiang, the former prime minister or premier, and Hu Chunhua, these are the Communist Youth League leaders. Hu Chunhua was supposed to become the sixth generation leader after Xi Jinping at the 20th Party Congress. However, Hu Chunhua was not even made a Politburo member. So that was the controversy at that time when Hu Jintao was taken away. So if there was a successor for Xi Jinping, then Hu Chunhua should have become the general secretary. But that did not happen because Xi Jinping wanted to be the leader for life as president and possibly as general secretary. General secretary post does not have terms, but the president of the PRC and the vice president have 2 terms. Now, Xi Jinping is in the 3rd term. And in March 2018, he made president for life. So he can continue as president. However, there are some rumors recently because the 4th plenary session of the Communist Party's Central Committee did not meet for 19 months so far. Typically, in a party's Congress life term of 5 years, there will be 8 plenary sessions. Immediately after the party Congress, the first plenary session nominates the General Secretary. And the second plenary session brings forward the leadership positions both in the party and the state. And the third plenary session basically looks at the economic reforms. And so this is one we can say has happened in the Chinese system. So the Xi Jinping's faction includes Shanghai Gang, New Zhejiang Army, Shanxi people. There is other, like the Tsinghua University graduates. The fourth faction is the military, and their presence in the Politburo, Central Committee, and the other structures will give them much more power. For instance, in Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, there is no reservation for the Indian Armed Forces. But in the case of China, the PLA has some reservations, 13% roughly in the Central Committee. There are 2 in Politburo. And in the National People's Congress, 10% membership is reserved for the PLA. So this is not present in American Congress or Indian Parliament or others. Finally, there is a faction called the princelings, those who are born to the revolutionary leaders. Xi Jinping was a princeling, but there are also others who were princelings. So these are the factions in the Communist Party. On your other question that you raised on the how does China resolve the debt, aid, and investments, given the losses that they face. I don't think the Chinese are facing any losses as such. They invested 1.2 trillion in Belt and Road Initiative. So these are not losses, these are net gain for China, because the construction of a roadway or a railway or a fiber optics, energy pipelines, airport, or other infrastructure projects. These are all done with excess capacities in China. China produces 1 billion tons of steel and 24,000 metric tons of cement, which is something like 55% of global production. Steel production is more than half of the global production. So China is using these for the BRI. So it is not a loss for China because they are using excess capacity. And this is for the benefit of China itself. China produces 8 million graduates every year, and many of them are sent for the BRI construction as engineers, technicians, or others. So China is using its own capacities to build BRI, and from the debts in several countries, they are getting rare earth metals, they are getting other strategic resources, almost on a monopoly basis. So they are not actually losing, they are actually gaining in terms of these captured resources or overcapacity related. Of course, they're also losing, but China has the Security Council membership. China is also fanning out in terms of its foreign policy influence. So China is very conscious of what it is spending, and China is going to get all that from these strategic leaderships that I mentioned before. So this is the Chinese position. Of course, there may be some losses in between, but then cumulatively, China gained in terms of becoming the global power. you need to spend to become global power. You cannot say we lost, say, 100 rupees, but they may have gained in terms of foreign policy power. So it is not done with ledgers. We have spent 100 rupees, so we should get 102 rupees in total for the whatever, all the balance sheet. These are the imponderables that China is getting out of the BRI aid, loans, and others. There are autonomous regions like Xinjiang Autonomous Region, Tibet Autonomous Region, Guangxi Autonomous Region, and there are also autonomous prefectures, counties, and other varieties. There is also the Inner Mongolian Autonomous Region. So these are big autonomous regions at the provincial level, state level. But there are at the prefecture, county level as well, tehsil and region level. So these are the autonomous regions. Now, under the constitution, the Chinese party state need to protect the ethnic minorities' rights and interests. These cannot be the general rules and regulations of China cannot be applied in the autonomous regions. But this is theory. This is not practice. So for this, we need to go into the minority rights. These include retaining certain marriage patterns. For example, in Islam, you have polygamy, more than one wife. So the same thing the constitution reserves for the Uyghurs or the Huizu Muslim communities. So they can have more than one wife. And so they can retain their marriage patterns, traditions of conducting one's personal life, or right to engage in various forms of religious practices. Sometimes these are considered by communist China as superstitious, but they can still retain these under the constitution. Now, this is theory. This is what is there in the constitution. In reality, there is a new concept called Sinicization of Islam, Sinicization of Tibetan Buddhism, and other religions. So basically, they want to convert everything into Chinese, Han Chinese. For example, you cannot name your son as Muhammad based on Prophet Muhammad. You cannot have a beard like most Muslims have. Sometimes there are restrictions on Friday mosque prayers or things like these. So Sinicization means rewriting Quran, rewriting Tibetan Buddhism or other religions into Chinese format. So this is the key problem in the ethnic minorities, which they perceive that their autonomy has been lost. Previously, they are exempt from the one-child policy. They can have any number of babies. But this also now there is some kind of restriction. Muslims don't eat pork, but the forcible consumption of pork and other. So this has become a practice recently, which the ethnic minorities have some concerns expressed. So it is there in education, finance, culture, religion, and others. So the while the constitution has freedom of religion, this is one of the main grouses in terms of the constitutional rights being violated by the Second is the Han Chinese migrating to the ethnic minority regions. In other words, demographic changes that have happened in recent times. So what China did was, instead of following integration policy, like India follows towards its minorities, like Kashmiris, like Nagas, like others, China is today following the assimilation policy. Instead of integration, they are following assimilation. This is creating a lot of alienation. It has also resulted in great Han Chinese chauvinism, which resulted in protests by the ethnic minorities. I mentioned population displacement. In Tibet, for example, there are more Han Chinese who have landed in Tibet. Han Chinese in Xinjiang, they have now become minorities in the minority regions with Han Chinese influx. Then public life and jobs, these are mainly occupied by the Han Chinese. It is estimated that 90% of jobs are now taken away by the Han Chinese. For example, clerical jobs, medical doctors, bus drivers, uh, uh, all these positions have been now taken over by the Han Chinese. So there is unemployment among the ethnic minorities. The average yearly income of the Uyghurs, Tibetans, Mongols has also been reduced compared to the Han Chinese settlers. So economic problems have increased. Religious reprisals. Uh, you may have seen in the newspaper reports that China had demolished several mosques. During Cultural Revolution and even now, some 6,000 Buddhist monasteries have been demolished. Likewise, mosques, synagogues of the Jews, and churches of the Christians. So those are the problems that these minorities faced. Well, you have the phenomenon of Chaiwala becoming prime minister. And you also have the melting pot in the US. No black could become a president before Obama. And no woman even now could become a president in the US. So we can say that in democracies, there is still a chance to somebody becoming from local level to the highest level. This is the beauty of democracies. But in the case of China, as I mentioned before, most leaders belong to one or the other factions. So you need to belong to some of these factions, not a local level, village level activists. So this is one problem with the Chinese political system. Second, of course, there could be mobility depending on the meritocracy. If the candidate has merit, exceptional qualities, sometimes they become higher leaders. It is said that Premier Li Keqiang was an ordinary student, and of course, but he joined the Communist Youth League, and so his promotions were guaranteed. He passed away some 2 years ago. So this system doesn't allow for a gate crasher, unlike in India or in other countries. So that problem is there. So constitution has some provisions for the local governments, but the Communist Party is not structured at the local village level. So the Chinese political administrative system is village, county, prefecture, province, center. So if somebody wants to go up from the village level, it is pretty difficult because there is no party organization. Party organization is at the county level, at the tehsil level, something like a tehsil level. So it's pretty hard for somebody to get promoted from the local level to highest levels. I do not know of any example of anyone becoming like this, but it may be a rare occurrence.
So, could you please throw some light on the Chinese foreign policy and how it functions?
Foreign policy again is governed by the central small leading groups. In the Politburo Standing Committee, there are 7 small leading groups. So what happens is that the small leading group has a foreign affairs bureau, and there is one Politburo Standing Committee member is in charge of the foreign policy. In general, the General Secretary is chairing the session of this foreign affairs small leading group. And there are other members as well. So that is how this is kind of conducted. So you have so this is the basic format. Then there is the Central Foreign Affairs Bureau in the Central Committee. Then there is Central Foreign Affairs Commission, but this was established in 2018 onwards. And current Foreign Minister Wang Yi, who is also a Politburo member, is in charge of the Foreign Affairs Commission. The next level is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, in which Wang Yi is also the foreign minister. Then third decision maker, you can say, because this is part of globalization. So the commercial lobby, Ministry of Commerce, they have some say in economic diplomacy or exports and imports, WTO related aspects, mergers and acquisitions, or others. Finally, another decision maker is the PLA, the Ministry of National Defense and the People's Liberation Army, or rather the Central Military Commission. So the Deputy Chief of General Staff of the PLA is also a member of the Foreign Affairs group in the Central Small Leading Group. So that's how the military also exerts. Because the military is highly patriotic, so they don't allow for a compromise on sovereignty and territorial integrity issues, on Taiwan, on Senkaku Islands, on India-China border areas, on South China Sea disputes. On these contentious issues, they don't allow for a compromise. Even if the foreign ministry wants to have a compromise, they don't allow for these by exerting pressure. So these are some basic determinants to explain the foreign policy. But there are also the Communist Party itself is changing its positions, right? Its ideology changed from Mao Zedong's extreme left policies to the current reform and opening up. So today you have also nationalism in China, the wolf warrior diplomacy. You have also the China dream, China rejuvenation, or restoring the Middle Kingdom status. So these are new things that have come about in the Communist Party's agenda, and that influences to a large extent. National interests are being defined and redefined. Previously, nobody spoke about national interests. But today there is, since 1982, there is a mention about the national interests. And China is pursuing these national interests. Then there is also the focus on superpowers, the United States, Russia, European Union, and others. As I was mentioning, globalization is also influencing foreign policy. Today, China wants to be the leader of globalization, which means the WTO related, which means global trade, global environmental debate, um, or many such aspects of globalization. So it is also, we need to factor in these new changes that have happened in the recent times. But there are also other institutions like think tanks, which can influence the discourse or help them to get the policy inputs. It is said that there are 100 major think tanks in China. They want to set up bigger think tanks. China Institute for Contemporary International Relations is the major think tank in China. 90% of their research is classified. And other think tanks also provide for various inputs into the system. So that's how the mechanism functions. We don't know the details, but this is how the. What should India do? I think uh, like Rain Labs is trying, we should study China more. We should have more students joining this program, exploring more subjects. We should understand. I began by saying China is very less transparent. It is very opaque. So we should have more students focusing on China. We should know how to influence China later on after studying China. So that is what we should do immediately. And so let me compliment your labs to have taken up this project. Um, at the moment, India-China relations are in a stalemate after the Galwan incident in June 2020. We have now renewed the diplomatic relations since October 21st last year, but no full diplomatic engagement has occurred. We used to have 30 dialogue mechanisms. Only the military to military dialogue mechanism and the Ministry of External Affairs related WMCC is now under discussions. We have not had any other interactions. We, of course, had the National Security Advisor, Mr. Ajit Doval, going last year to China. And a week ago, Raksha Mantri Rajnath Singh was in China for the SEO Defense Ministerial meeting. But that is a multilateral meeting rather than a bilateral meeting. So we don't have much bilateral relations right now. It is expected that Prime Minister Modi is to visit Tianjin in September for the SEO meeting. But again, this is a multilateral meeting rather than a bilateral meeting. So we have very less progress in the bilateral relations as of now after the Galwan incident. At that time, Dr. Jaishankar mentioned that unless until peace and tranquility prevails on the border, we will not have bilateral relations between the two. We don't have currently full peace and tranquility on the border. We have disengagement and patrolling. We don't have de-escalation and de-induction of troops on the border. So it is limited in nature and hence limited bilateral relations so far. How do we improve? Both the countries need to first resolve the problem of peace and tranquility. China has been slow on this process, so that is the key problem. I don't think China and India have any role there. Um, so, um, so what did the Dalai Lama, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, say on day before yesterday, July 2nd? On that day, he made a statement saying that the Dalai Lama institution will continue without interference from anybody. This is what he said. He didn't mention China. He didn't mention India. He didn't mention any country. So I don't think China and India should be involved in that process. Of course, others should not intervene means that China should not intervene because the Chinese want to appoint the next Dalai Lama, while the Dalai Lama is saying that religious traditions will be the guide for the reincarnation process. The procedure to appoint the next Dalai Lama should be based on religious practices. So that is what he said, which means that no role for any other country. It's a religious matter. So I wanted to conclude by saying that uh, Labs is doing a good job of approaching the students to explore more knowledge-based systems. And I want to suggest that majority of the students should focus on China for various reasons. Number one, China is the second largest economy today, $19 trillion economy. Secondly, it is a Security Council member. Thirdly, it influences the neighborhood and India in substantial manner in economy, politics, military, and others. So we need hundreds and thousands of analysts to look at China, various dimensions, whether China is an opportunity or is it indifferent or is it a challenge. We need to base our research on objective criteria and look at the issue from a dispassionate point of view. And more students should explore the China angle. For this, you need to learn the Chinese language. Otherwise, you will not be able to understand China because much of the material is coming out in the Western countries. They have their own national interests and it is not adequate for us. So we need to learn the language and HRD ministry or Ministry of Education now has a cultural exchange program to go to China and for MA program, PhD programs, etc. So all of you should apply. For the past 5 years, this has not been open because of the Galwan incident, but sooner than later, this will be opened up. So all of you should apply for the Ministry of Education Cultural Exchange Program to go to China and learn the language for 1 year at least minimum, and then explore the subject of China, various dimensions of China. You can even study the sculpture. You can study art forms, music forms. There is so much to explore in China. So I want you to avail the fellowships offered by the government of India and learn the language. That is the key to understand China. There are currently also several companies and others who are giving fellowships. Secondly, given the restrictions today in China due to the Galwan incident, you can also explore Taipei Economic and Culture Center's fellowships. There are some 80 fellowships offered by TECC. So please go to this website and apply for engineering subjects, for management, for international relations, for AI, for chips, the wafers, how to study these. There are many fellowships being offered by Taiwan today. They also teach Chinese language, and you can explore the China subject. extensively because the Taiwanese are the only people who understand China because of similar culture. And that is where you can actually crack knowing about China. Uh, so the Ministry of Education fellowships, TECC fellowships, you should all apply and learn the language first. Don't learn anything about foreign policy or others, just learn the language. That will open up the whole horizon of the Chinese world system. So this is what I want to say. When I was studying in China, we had one moral story. It's called Yukong Ishan, the old man who moved the mountains. That is the translation of Yukong Ishan. So I want to narrate this story. So an old man on a high mountain, uh, he thinks that another mountain is blocking the sun's vision from his hut. So he starts digging the mountain top of the one obstructing mountain. And passers-by, they say, "You're a foolish old man. How can you move this mountain?" He said, "Yes, that is true. I cannot move the mountain, but my son, my daughter, my grandson, my granddaughters will do their job. They will move a few meters of the mountain in about 100 years or so. And finally, our hut will get the sunlight." So this is the determination. We also have in Bihar, in Bodh Gaya and other places, Maji, who had also constructed a road through the mountains, hills, so that people can have medical help received through a shortest route. So we also have this story. So remember this story to conduct your research on China.
Thank you so much, Professor Kondapalli, for sharing your invaluable insights on China and its evolving role in the international affairs. Your deep expertise and thoughtful analysis have greatly enriched our understanding, offering clarity on complex developments and making today's conversation truly engaging. We are grateful for your time and illuminating so many facets of Chinese politics and strategy on our podcast. Thank you so much, sir.